Thank you for being here. Um, I can't thank Sachi enough for organizing this. It is Couture Week in New Delhi, and I know that everyone's very tempted with all the lovely shows there, so it takes perseverance to make it here in the morning, so thank you for that. I, of course, want to thank Imperial for this wonderful location that we have, which has history, sensibility, authenticity. We have Radio Mirchi, that is also a supporter, our radio supporter, and we thank you for taking this talk about sustainability mainstream, which is part of my bigger agenda. I don't think sustainability should be in pockets. It is not an elite topic that we are addressing. We are talking about individual choices that can change our environment. So about me, just a little bit. Bandana Tewari, I'm Nepali, I am from the Himalayas. I had best education possible, and I worked in high fashion for 13 years, and my path organically veered from major consumerism towards sustainability. And I think I had to do that whole round to be able to realize that certain things were dysfunctional in our very fashionable consumerist lives that we lead. And so when I moved to Bali, it gave me respite, thinking space to be able to distill my thoughts and be pure about what my agenda was going to be for the next part of my life. And I have to say very truthfully and very humbly that I am so grateful that the universe showed me the direction to talk about sustainability in a happy, joyful, optimistic way. So in the 15 years that I worked in the fashion industry, observing and critiquing fashion industries domestically and globally, I realized that our need for unabated shopping to get more and more was not necessarily because we need things, but it was this hunger for more and more was out of boredom, lack of happiness perhaps. And while we do need a sense of gratification when we buy lovely things, we all want good design products, that is perfectly fine. I think this level of boredom that comes from the idea that new is new and newer is better, more is better, that became very dysfunctional in our, that is very dysfunctional in our lives. You know, Karl Marx said it was religion, but I think the new in fashion is really the opiate of the masses today. We are becoming hoarders, and to the extent that there's a wonderful book called Stuffocation. We are suffocated. We are suffocated by the stuff that we are hoarding. Sometimes we don't even use the things that we buy, and we just shove it under a closet and don't pull it out, and we are all, you know, sort of guilty of that. So it reminds me of what Oscar Wilde once said, what is a cynic? What is a cynic? A man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. So it's a time for us to wake up and see and evaluate how much stuff do we need, because the environment is bearing the cost. You know, there was a global online consumer report done by KPMG in 2017 and said, you know, this was done amongst like 50 countries, and said we are no longer, we don't go shopping. We are shopping all the time because we are online. And this constant need to shop constantly because of e-commerce, when you actually put some value in numbers and quantify it, it's almost 34 million shipping containers, each one as big as 20 feet long, 34 million, that is trading our goods every year. Now, I don't even want to talk about the carbon footprint of that kind of transaction that we ourselves will into this universe. And this was a problem that was seen even in 1915. You know, a German psychiatrist called Emil Kraepelin, he sounded the warning bell and called it omniomania, which is a need for shopping. And today we are all suffering from omniomania. So this shopping, what does it mean in reality? Because, you know, we see so many numbers being touted about pollution, carbon footprint, water resources depletion, what have you. And for me, because I'm terrible with numbers, I'm a little dyslexic when it comes to numbers, so let me put it this way. Every second, one garbage truck of clothes is either incinerated or goes into a landfill. Every second. What does that mean? That means you can fill 1.5 Empire State Buildings a day with clothes that are discarded. What does that mean? It means the whole of Sydney Harbour is dumped with clothes that have been thrown away every year. And that's the scale of how much we dispose and harm our environment. So for instance, a lot of us are wearing t-shirts. We don't think twice about cotton t-shirts that we wear. In fact, we think, oh, it's cotton. Probably doing a good job by wearing a cotton t-shirt. The amount of water it takes is 2,700 liters, which in reality is 3 years you're drinking water. You're drinking water. 3 years capacity of drinking water that goes into one t-shirt. So if we start looking at figures in this way, then we know that this idea of take, make, waste is dysfunctional. And it is absolutely ruining the environment, and the environment, Mother Earth, is carrying the weight of our greed. The fact of the matter is our population is going to be higher than it is now, and it is said by 2030 we may have more than 500, the equivalent of more than 500 billion t-shirts that are going to be produced every year. I mean, do we really need that much of stuff to invade our space? So this is one thing I want to read out to you. It's from the University of Singularity. Like, I love taking this example because we forget what that one fast fashion t-shirt that you go to and say, oh my God, it's just $5. Nowadays in parts of Europe, you have to pay more for a great cappuccino. But here I'm paying $4 or $5 for a t-shirt. So here's what happens. Consider, and this is from a University of Singularity by a futurist who spoke about it. So consider a single t-shirt, your lowest common denominator product. First, you grow cotton in one country and then ship it to another country to be beaten down and bleached into something sort of white. Then it's sent to another country to be spun into yarn, and then shipped to another country to be sewn into a t-shirt, and then shipped back to a country like, let's say, America, where we screen print Team Building Exercise 1999 on it. We pay $4.99, wear it one time, throw it to the bottom of the closet, and we are done. Now, this is not just an American problem, it's ours. In India, we are one of the biggest manufacturers for the world. So I think we need to start owning these stories, because what it reminds us is every time we are going out there, we should be able to pull back and say, do I really need it? I feel in recent years we've tunnel visioned ourselves into a place of dystopia where most of us still turn a blind eye to the impact of individual choices, environmental, societal, and ethical. And Mother Earth is carrying the weight of this greed. So who do we turn to for ideological guidance? This is not just about when you want a collective consciousness to rise and sweeping changes to happen collectively, not just individually, collectively, then you know that sustainability is something that has to come from the heart. It's an ideological commitment. So who can be turned to? It's 150 years of Gandhi. I travel around the world talking about Gandhi and fashion. I'm not going to give you the long version of it because we do have a panel discussion after this, but it's a very compelling story to be able to talk about Gandhi and his relationship with clothes and what it can teach us ideologically. And we wonder why Gandhi, because Winston Churchill called him that half-naked fakir, the poorest of the poor. What does he have to do talking about fashion? He was wearing just a loincloth. In my research, I found an incredible essay by a professor called Dr. Gonzalez in Rome University, and it was titled Half-Naked Fakir, the story of Gandhi's personal search for sartorial integrity. Now, what is sartorial integrity? Professor Gonzalez explains it as the exploration of truth through clothes. In Gandhi's quest for truth and authenticity in thoughts and action, his clothes played a powerful role that till date holds a mirror to the realities of our clothing world and the challenges of consumerism. Whilst what I will talk about now is it's a longer piece, I will keep it very short. If we were to simply divide Gandhi's life into three parts, There was the London chapter where he studied law. Then he went to South Africa to practice law. And then he came to India when it was in the throes of colonization. So when he was in London, that was the time when he was very gentrified. If you look at his pictures of that time, he was suited and booted, wanted to look like an English gentleman, completely disassociated with the idea of Indianness. In fact, he learned how to play the piano or the violin, took elocution classes because he was embarrassed at that time not looking English enough. He was vegetarian too, that embarrassed him a lot. So anyway, so at that time, there was no identifying with his Indian identity. It was, you had to be gentrified, you had to be anglicized. By the time he went to South Africa to practice law, there were two types of Indians in South Africa, which was a very bigoted government at that time. There were Indians like him who, were educated, smart, affluent. And then there were the indentured laborers, the menial laborers who were marginalized and completely marginalized by a very white government. At that point, too, at that time, Gandhi did not understand why he was not considered to be a gentleman and why he was clubbed with the indentured laborers. So one day when he takes a train and he's got a first-class ticket and he's wearing a suit, he still gets booted out. He's like, what does it take? I look like a gentleman. I behave like a gentleman. I've paid my money and yet I'm not good enough. And around that time, he sees Bala Sundaram, a laborer who's holding his head, who's been beaten black and blue and teeth missing. And that is a huge turning point in Gandhi's life. He realizes, my gosh, the authenticity of my being. I've been selfish in the way I'm trying to expose my own moral sense by the way I dress. So he changes his garment at that time to the white kurta and the white dhoti, and he calls it the mourning dress in order to start identifying with the ones who didn't have the privileges like him. So when he's in South Africa for the next 10 years, he spends time living in a community life. He lives in what later became, the Satyagraha farm. Very frugal community life, where it was all about sharing, caring. He worked in the Boer War as a nurse to understand the pains and suffering of people who've been injured in war. So with all this, it was a massive shift in his consciousness, which was displayed by what he wore, the mourning dress. By the time he gets to India, and he goes to north, west, east, south, and as I said, in throes of colonization, we've been uprooted by the British. Textile industry has come to a standing halt because India being a rural economy, it was nipped at the butt, right? So what happened was all the cotton that went from India to the mills in Lancashire in England would be turned what would be called fast fashion now and sent back to India to be sold at a premium to Indians. And that's when our Khadi movement started. I'm not going to give you a history lesson. We've all studied it. So the Khadi movement, as we know, Gandhi just announced to the entire country, said, give up the mill-owned clothes, burn them, and pick up the charka and weave your own clothes as an act of self-reliance, act of Swadeshi. And so this, as we all know, gave us freedom, not very long after that. But while he's announcing it to the country to give up and burn their clothes, he realized the poorest of the poor didn't have any clothes to burn. And at that time, he realized how insignificant his journey had been, how little he understood about the woes of the common man, the man who he one day became, the fakir. So that's when he even gives up the kurta and the dhoti, and he just wears that one loin cloth. Today, the idea, when we imagine Gandhi, we see him bare-chested with just the loincloth, because that was his whole idea, to make his clothes the fulcrum of transparency, his moral transparency. So when Winston Churchill said, half-naked fakir, Gandhiji took it as a compliment. He said, now you see that now my clothes, my whole being, you can see is identified with the poorest of the poor. And that's what makes him Mahatma Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. So for me, this gives me goosebumps every time I talk about, because it is a story that is not repeated in the political history of the world, and that clothes played such a significant role in our moral compass of how we need to be transparent in the way we consume in this world and how we identify with people who are marginalized, I think it's a game changer for me. And this is where we need to dig deep and get into the ideology of sustainability. So with Gandhi, he was convinced that social inequalities could only be won by the power of satya, truth, ahimsa, nonviolence, and swadeshi, self-reliance. These may sound like idealistic beliefs, but he turned them into mass socio-political movements. The fundamental guiding principle that was the foundation of Gandhian philosophy was ahimsa, or nonviolence. Nonviolence, as he said, in thought, deed, and action. The fashion industry, we are told, is the second largest pollutant in the world, and it is imperative that we weave the thread of ahimsa into the tapestry of a fashion industry. Ahimsa actually goes to the heart of the dialogue on sustainability and the ethics of fashion production. It holds up a mirror to our technological progress and industrialization. On a fundamental level, it asks if our systems and patterns of consumptions are non-violent. Will it continue to be linear systems of fast, unscrupulous production, consumption, and disposable make waste, creating extraordinary waste, or do we create a circular system where the end of one life cycle of the product is the beginning of a new cycle of life? Gandhi believed in the idea of aparigraha, one of the 11 vows he took. It means we are mere trustees, we are custodians of the environment. We are not owners. So the onus is on us to pass on the environment in a good condition to other generations. I mean, Gandhi drew so much attention from the biggest minds in the world, the deep ecology of Arne Naess, the peace research of Johan Galtung, the economics of E.F. Schumacher, are all argued to have been deeply influenced by Gandhi. Now ahimsa should be at the heart of a conscious fashion world that can start undoing the untold damage done to our environment. Gandhi was an activist, as we all know. So today, we need a world of activist designers and activist creators and activist consumers who are committed ideologically to be slow thinkers and slow creators and slow consumers. Ahimsa is at the heart of the slow fashion movement, a movement that focuses not on quantity, but time. It is not about the speed of making and consuming things. It's mindful luxury characterized by long life, authenticity, environmentally friendly designs created with great sensitivity to local crafts and cultures. If the process is less important than the end product, then we will continue to be fooled by this industry that is damaging the environment. As we all collectively work to fulfill the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2016, we must realize that connecting to Gandhian philosophy is critical to ensuring we uphold ourselves to a moral responsibility to adopt sustainable practices. Gandhi was called the conscious of humanity, and his lessons are by no means alien to us, but we need to repackage and refresh ever so often. Today, we make more than 150 billion garments a year. That is about 20 new garments for me and you and the whole world every year. This should be a reminder to each one of us what Gandhi said 3/4 of a century ago. The world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Thank you.